Hello everybody and welcome to this new episode from Bikotic, the Canyon Endurace. There's a lot of different versions on the UK website, but which one's right for you? Well, let's have a look. So I'm making today's episode entirely in the Bikotic website. You're very welcome to come and have a look. It's bikotic.com. There is a mobile version, but I've spent a lot more time developing the desktop version so far. So fire up the old desktop. Bikes are much better to look at on big screens anyway. So let's get into it. So since my last video where I introduced the Bikotic website, I've done quite a lot of work on it. You used to have to choose the bike from this drop-down menu, but you can almost forget about that now because we have a search button. Click on that and then you can search by manufacturer, model, bike type, group set, and then you can sort the bike. You can also have any combination of these. So say an Aero bike with Shimano Dura Ace Di2 and you want to sort by the most expensive, and then you click get the bikes. Close that. So if you click on that button, my crib sheet is now up here, and this is the first video I've made properly in this crib sheet, so it's the only one. Canyon Endurace, which one? So if you click on that, by the time you come to see this, the video will be up here, because obviously this is me making it now. And basically this is my list of notes that I'm going to go through in this video. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was 2014. It's the Ultimate versus the Endurace. And in fact, 2014 was the year that the Endurace was introduced by Canyon. So what was their thinking? Let's load up those bikes. And here it is, the Canyon Ultimate CF SLX 8. The best picture I could find. I guess 2014 was actually quite a long time ago now. Seems like yesterday to me. But it was an Ultimate that Nairo Quintana won the Giro d'Italia on in 2014. So Canyon had pretty much nailed the all-round race bike back then. But then they had this crazy idea. Maybe normal people would like a bike a bit like this, except a bit more relaxed. So along came the Endurace, which is this bike here. And if we fade between the two, we can see some obvious differences. We've lifted up the front. Take the weight off your back and your arms. Both rim brakes back then. But you can obviously see the Endurace has actually got fatter tyres on. I think back then that was a 25 GP 4000. Doesn't seem particularly big in today's standards, but when the pros were on the 23s, that is going to be more comfortable. Now on the full-blown race bike we've got the 5339, but we've toned that down to the 5034. Basically makes your gearing a bit easier. And if you're wondering what this is down here, this is working out the gear lengths for each bike as you compare between them. And you'll see there that it's the wheel circumference, including the width of the tyre, multiplied by the amount of times the back wheel gets rotated when you do one turn of the crank, according to the gear ratio. But the bottom line is, the longer the top line, the harder the hardest gear, and the smaller the bottom line, the easier the easiest gear. Does that make sense? Maybe. This is reflected at the back as the Ultimate has got a 25. And the Endurace a 28, which again by today's standards we all tend to spin a lot more than we did back then. We've also got the split carbon seat post, which is going to offer more compliance than the race bike seat post. These bikes have got pretty similar DNA as you can see, but after 100 miles sportif or something you're probably going to be more comfortable getting off the Endurace, and that's basically the idea of it. Interestingly, something I did notice on the Giro this year, which has just finished, was that Alejandro Valverde was actually riding his Aeroad up the mountains. I don't think I actually saw any of the Canyon teams using the Ultimate anymore. It is actually a pretty old design of bike now, so maybe Canyon don't give it to their teams anymore, or the teams have just said they don't want it anymore. Perhaps that means there'll be a new version coming soon. And if you're interested, that's a Scott Addict RC, Cube Lightning, Willier Zero SLR, Tarmac SL7, Merida Sculptura, another Scott Addict RC, and then the Pinarello Dogma F. All those bikes are in the Bikotic database, so you can compare them all together if you wanted to. And if we just quickly call up the Aeroad and the Ultimate, so this is the new style Aeroad. And if you fade through to pretty much the top of the range CFR Ultimate, you can see the differences there. Obviously with the thicker Aero-shaped tubing, the Aeroad is going to be more aerodynamic. Still not entirely sure about the little rubber mount they've put there to stop the seat post getting ground away by dirt. Doesn't look great, does it? Okay, so it's 2022. What does Canyon have for us in the Endurace range now? Let's get them up and have a look. So if we click on the search button there and type into model Endurace, which I've already obviously done a few times, and let's sort by the most expensive and click get the bikes. That pulls 18 bikes out of the database, but we're only interested in 2022, which is 16 bikes. And this is obviously telling us the average price is £3,121. All those with green at the bottom are below that price, and all those with red are above it. So starting at the very top of the range, we have the CF SLX. We've got a Dura Ace Di2 version and a SRAM Red eTap version. CF SLX stands for Carbon Fiber Superlight Extreme. I have started a new page called Jargon Buster. As and when I come across these bits of jargon, I will add it. There's not a huge amount on there at the moment. I think it's just Canyon and some of the DT Swiss wheel stuff. But comment down below if you've got anything that you'd like adding to that, and that will build up over time. Okay, so that's the only two with the SLX frame, and then we go down to the CF SL. That's made up of these 5 bikes here. Slight anomaly here of the CF SL8, which comes in with a price lower than the CF SL7 and also lower than 2 of the CFs that we'll look at in a sec, and that is because it's a mechanical group set, mechanical Ultegra. So it's thrown it a bit out of whack really, but we'll get back to that. And then we drop down to what was released not so long ago by Canyon, and that's the CF Endurace. And this has a completely updated carbon frame, and that's made up of these 4 green bikes. Then we drop down from carbon to aluminium, and that's these 4 bikes at the bottom, of which these 2 here are rim brake. That's good that Canyon is still offering rim brake versions. And that just leaves this pork chop here, but just ignore that because that's an electric bike. First thing I wanted to do was a quick comparison of the SLX version. So here we go, Dura Ace Di2 with the new group set, and then the SRAM Red eTap access group set. Fading between the two, the bikes are basically identical, other than the Dura Ace version is £100 more, and the headline news here is that it's 120 grams less than the Red eTap version, and that is quite a big deal, isn't it? 120 grams, not to be sniffed at. If we look down here at the gearing ratios, Red eTap has a slightly wider range, but it's almost identical. And this bike comes with a maximum tyre clearance of 32mm, and interestingly Canyon put a 30mm on the front and a 32 on the back. Interestingly, when we drop down to the CF SL version, if we call this up, this is the SLX versus the SL. According to the Canyon website, the forks are different, and the SL has clearance for 30mm tyres, so very slightly more clearance on the SLX, even though they look absolutely identical frame-wise. But again, the headline here is between Dura Ace and Ultegra, and obviously the different carbon material, we've actually put on 590 grams of weight, but you are saving 2,900, so yeah, that's pretty good. Both come with a power meter. Got to say the Red eTap version came with a power meter too. If you then call up the CF SL8 Aero and the CF SL8 eTap, we fade between those two. Again, they look pretty much identical apart from the group set. And I know I'm going on about this a lot, but the SRAM Force is 290 grams heavier than the Ultegra. As far as I can tell, the rest of the bike looks identical. So that's quite a lot, isn't it? And these actually cost exactly the same, these two. Again, slightly wider gear range with SRAM Force, but it's not huge, is it? Then I thought here it would be a good idea to bring up the Grizl and compare the Endurace to the Grizl, and I pulled it up here because I like this paint job, and they're pretty similar, aren't they, these grey paint jobs? And if we fade between the two there, you can clearly see the Grizl is a lot longer, fatter tyres. And the other thing that seems to happen, this seems to be the style at the moment, the gravel bikes are longer on the top tube and then shorter in the stem. I'm not 100% why that is. Is it so you can get a bigger bag on the top there? Maybe someone could comment down below and let me know why that is. It's also quite interesting if we line up the head tubes here and then fade between the two. you can clearly see the extra clearance in the forks there. And actually, if we line the tyres up where they touch the ground, quite interesting to fade between the two, and you can see how the tyres lift up the bike, but they've sort of stolen the space out of the head tube there. There's a lot for designers to think about when they are making these bikes that can take lots of different tyre sizes, because the tyres actually make a big difference. And obviously the fatter the tyre, it changes the gearing as well, so that's another consideration. As you can see, the gearing here is a much easier on the gravel bike, get you through the rough stuff. Okay, so next up, let's see what the difference is between the CF SL Aero and the non-Aero. We load up the bikes. Here's the Aero version and the non-Aero version. So they both have Shimano Ultegra Di2, which is the latest 12-speed electronic second-tier group set from Shimano, so no difference there. And just flicking between the two, clearly I can see that there's 690 grams difference. So the Aero bike is a good chunk lighter, but is 700 pounds more expensive. The Aero version has the power meter, and the non-Aero version doesn't. So we have to imagine that most of that extra weight is coming from the cheaper DT Swiss Endurance LN wheels, which, though a lot shallower, are clearly a lot heavier. And this pair of DT Swiss ERC 1400 35mm wheels, though not that aero, are clearly a good set of wheels, over £2,000. So I'm thinking it's actually probably better value to actually get a bike with a power meter and a decent pair of wheels already. There we go. Next up, the CF SL Force versus Rival. There's the Force version and then the yellow Rival version. Both got a power meter. Again, we've got this difference in the wheels, and the Rival version is 760 grams heavier, so quite a lot heavier, but £1,150 cheaper, so that's pretty good. I'm not massively keen on the way the Rival group set looks, if I'm totally honest. I like the look of the Force one, but that just looks a bit plain to me. That's just personal choice. And then we come to that anomaly I mentioned earlier, where we have the Ultegra Di2 versus the Mechanical. So let's load these up, flick between the two, and the difference here is that we have Ultegra Mechanical. Now the rumour was that this will get phased out. Still seems to be a lot of bikes being sold with it on, so I'm not sure when or if it is actually getting phased out. But in this comparison, everything else looks pretty similar. Gear ratio is exactly the same, tyres exactly the same, wheels exactly the same, and this is the funny bit. The mechanical version is 100 grams lighter and £1,100 cheaper. So you've got to really want to have that electronic group set. It is 12 speed versus 11. But once the bike's in a certain gear, is there a benefit? There's the question. Bit of personal choice there. Let me know what you think down in the comments down below. Is it worth it? So now it's time we drop down to the CF. Here's the first bike in the CF range, and it's the CF7 Aeroad, £2,849. Comes with the electronic Rival group set. And if we compare that to the CF SL7 Rival group set version, you can clearly see the differences there. This new frame set is higher again at the front. We've got the top tube mounts here. Interesting, this looks kind of almost more old-fashioned to me, whereas the old one looked more modern. Not sure what the thinking was there really. Bit more beefy around there. The SL has the power meter, and actually none of the CFs have a power meter, so no power meter. This particular version is called the Aeroad, and as far as I can tell, just because it's got fat 35mm tyres on. And the CF actually has a maximum clearance of 35mm. So I guess you can do a bit of grav. There's two versions of this CF with the Rival group set. Load up the other one, and that's this one, CF7. And it basically looks exactly the same to the Aeroad, other than those fatter tyres. I can't see any other difference. What you can see is that with those fatter tyres it very slightly changes the gearing. Very slightly. However, for the same price, you're also coming in 320 grams lighter with the smaller tyres, which I guess you'd kind of expect. If we load up the Ultegra Mechanical version, as with the CF SLs, not only are you paying more money, you're actually getting a heavier bike if you go for the electronic rival group set, and we're talking 240 grams here, £650 more expensive for what basically is a completely identical bike, really. So yeah, got to have a good think about that. And then we also get a 105 version. Load that up there, fade between the two. 105 Ultegra, very similar group sets. Exactly the same gear ratios, 11:34 on these bikes, so we've got a good spread of gears, and kind of as you would expect, 105 is a bit heavier, 240 grams, but cheaper by 250 quid. So all up 8.62 kilograms, which in this day and age for a disc brake bike, guess that's not too bad, is it? For £1,949. And then it's time to go aluminium. If we compare that to the 105 CF, so it's the same group set you can see there. Slight change in the shape of the frame. You've got these nicely smoothed out welds, they look really nice. Still got the top tube mounts there. Quite different there at the back. But it's nice. As far as it goes, I think that looks nice. £1,649, so it's £300 cheaper and nearly 600 grams heavier. So it is quite heavy, I guess, 9.2 kilograms. But you can get a Tiagra version of that, which is exactly the same frame. And the Tiagra gears, we've gone down to the 5034. So if you look down here, you'll see that the gearing is easier on the Tiagra version. The aluminium disc does have a clearance of 35mm. Tiagra, a bit cheaper, a bit heavier. I've got Tiagra on my winter bike and I absolutely love it. Very easy to set up, don't have a problem with it at all. And then we drop down to the rim brake, although some of you will disagree that it's a drop, and in some ways I'd have to agree with you, because we fade through to the rim brake version. It's actually 740 grams lighter, so a lot lighter, and 400 quid cheaper. So that's pretty good, isn't it? But there's no mention of clearance on the Canyon website for the rim brake version, and if we look here where the rim brake is, you can see how with the disc brake you can fit much wider tyres in, because the throw of the brake means that we can't have as much space there. You also have externally routed cables, and you don't have the weld smoothed off. It's just normal welding there now. But there you go, it's cheaper, lighter, why not? What is interesting is if we look down here, it looks like the bottom bracket is much lower. If we click this button here, you get a side-by-side comparison, and it is a little bit lower, but if I fade halfway, actually line the tyres up, because the rim brake version has 28s and the disc brake version has a 32 on the back, and then fade between the two, it almost looks like that wiped out the difference in the bottom bracket. Almost looks identical now. So again, size of the tyres makes a difference to the geometry. Okay, then last but maybe not least, that rim brake comes in a Tiagra version. There we go. And a bit heavier, 260 grams heavier, but £150 cheaper, and at £1,099, what's not to like? The only real thing I can notice is the Tiagra brakes are not quite as beefy as the 105s, but hey ho, you might have a pair of lighter wheels lying around, chuck those in, and that is a solid bike. I got no problem with that. So out of interest, what if we compare the most expensive bike to the cheapest bike? We can load those up, and here's the CF SLX 9 Di2 Dura Ace, and if we fade through to the rim brake, Tiagra version. That's the difference just looking at the bikes. But the aluminium Tiagra version with rim brakes is £6,300 cheaper and 1,840 grams heavier. So that's what you're paying for, on top of the electronic group set, the extra clearance, the carbon frame, split seat post. Boom! So I'm just going to quickly sort the bikes with a couple of different sorts here. First one being my geometry formula, and you actually won't see some of these on the website because I haven't trickled them down yet, but on my beta version here I've got something called Geo Formula. Get the bikes 2022 only. And if you've seen my other videos about the geometry formula, basically a spectrum. On the left we have more Hummingbird, on the right we have more Albatross. So it's no surprise here that the electric chunky bike comes in right at the end of the Albatross. Then we've got all these bikes in yellow and they all have the same score. So these bikes here are more Hummingbird or closer to the sort of ultimate than the Grizl, if you like, than these bikes. And this is the aluminium rim brakes and the CF. They all have the same score, and we'll see how that compares in a minute to some competition. I also have clearance, so I can sort by clearance 2022, and we've touched on this earlier, but the CF has 35mm clearance, the SLX 32, the CF SL 30mm clearance, and actually the two aluminium disc brake bikes have 35mm too, and then the two rim brakes, it doesn't actually say, so I wouldn't expect to get much into those. And then which ones have a power meter? Well, bottom line is none of the aluminium or the CF bikes have a power meter, so your cheapest bet there is the CF SL8. So the last sort I want to do is the value formula 2022, and this is my formula that looks at the weight and the price, because those two things are intrinsically linked. On the whole, the more you pay, the lighter the bike becomes. Not all the time, but on the whole. Now, using the value formula, kind of as you would expect, you have to pay for that lightness. So the two SLXs basically come last. Forget about the electric bike, and then you probably could have guessed that the two rim brake bikes come first. They're super good value, really. If you're happy to go with rim brakes, you get a lot for your money, and they're significantly lighter than the disc brake versions. But if it's definitely a carbon bike you're after, it would be the Ultegra Mechanical CF8 and then the 105 CF7. Good value for money, and coming in at the sort of reasonable end of the weight scale, I guess. I wouldn't exactly call them light, but not horrendous. However, for me, I have to say the winner, and if I was going to buy one of these bikes, I think it would be this one. It's the CF SL8. It's got a power meter, it's got mechanical Ultegra. Not only lighter than the eTap rival version, it's actually lighter than its bigger brother, the Di2 version, unless you splash out on the Aero version, but that is a lot more money. There we go, the CF SL8 wins it for me. 8.06 kilograms, £2,699. Now if we click on view on Canyon website, let's see if we can actually buy one. Scroll down, coming soon. My size would be medium, so August. Well, not terrible. Can't order it yet, have to wait for them to notify me, but not too horrendous, I guess, considering how it's been the last few years. So let's have a quick look at the competition. So if we go to the search bar, take out Endurace, and if we go to bike type Endurance, group set Ultegra Mechanical, because that is CF SL8 that we decided we were going to buy. Let's keep it in the value formula. Let's get the bikes. This is what I have in the database as the competition, and there's only two bikes that come before it in the value formula, CF8 that we talked about, and then we've got the Vitus Zenium CRS Ultegra. I've actually got the Tiagra version of this bike, and I'm pretty happy with it. Got the Scott Addict, not the RC, this is the Addict. We've got some cubes, Cannondale, Merida, the Trek Domane, Defy, and actually there's no weight for the Cervelo Caledonia or the Sculptura Endurance, so they come last in the value formula. Actually, one of my favourite looking bikes here is the Willier Garda. I think that's a pretty cool looking bike compared to the Canyon, but it's more expensive and it's heavier. Looks quite nice though, doesn't it? And what do people think about the Synapse with the lights and the radars on it and stuff like that, and the battery pack? Comparing the two, I think it's very brave of Cannondale to try and add all this stuff. Personally, not for me. Sort of feel it will go out of date quite quickly, and I like the option of being able to, well, A, take all this stuff off, but B, choose my own versions of these extras. So yeah, not for me. Also, I'd want the battery inside the frame if this was going to be a real concept. Having it sat there in the rain cannot be a good thing. Let me know what you think down below. So like I say, you can come to the Bikotic website and load any of these up to have a look for yourself. I won't bother going through them all now, but what I have done is I've put them all into a graph showing where they come in the geometry formula. And to give you an idea, here's the Aeroad with the Merida Sculptura team, the Reacto, the Tarmac SL7, Trek Madone, and then at the other end, towards the Albatross end, we've got the Canyon Grizl, kind of where you'd have expected it, there along with the Revolt, the Checkpoint, the Diverge, Speedster Gravel. And as we spoke about earlier, the racers are using the Aeroad, and maybe it is because the Ultimate is a bit towards the comfort side. But having said that, here's the new Cervelo R5, which is pretty close to the Ultimate. So got to take all this with a pinch of salt. But anyhow, here's the CF SL8, which is the Endurace that won for me, and then the Canyon Endurace CF8. So you can see that it's slightly more towards the Albatross end of the spectrum. Presumably that was a conscious decision from Canyon. Now that we're doing more sort of off-road gravelly stuff and we want bikes that can do a bit of everything, they've moved it a bit further up this side of the spectrum. So that makes sense. So as we saw, the only bike in the value formula to beat the CF SL8 was the Vitus Zenium. If we just fade between the two there, I got no problem with this Vitus really, but gotta say the Canyon looks like more of a refined bike to me. It is a bit more expensive, but it does have a power meter. So, yep, I'm sticking with the Canyon. What I did forget to do there was I actually sort this by what has a power meter. This is the Endurance Shimano Ultegra Mechanical group of bikes. Get the bikes. There is only one, and that is the bike that we chose. So that's pretty much it for this video. That's a run through the Canyon Endurace range. That's a pretty good look at the Bikotic.com website. There's nearly 200 bikes all lined up in the database now. If you look down here on the left, you can see all the latest bikes that I've added. If you look in Pro Bikes, I've added Jai Hindley's Giro winner. Please do leave me feedback. It's only because you guys give me feedback that I actually make these videos, because that's what motivates me. And then there's bike request. I need to know what you want in the database, so send me a message, let me know. And I just wanted to leave you with this. I've been adding a lot of bikes just lately, and I came across this next bike, which is the Peugeot PX10L from 1976. Fantastic website called steelvintage.com. Check it out. I was super impressed with it, but I love this bike. I don't know much about bikes from the 70s or even the 80s. It did astound me how similar it all is in some respects. So just the placement of the wheels there, look, it's almost like absolutely bang on. Everything is in almost exactly the same place. We've just got the obvious advancements in technology. We've now got the gear shifters up here on the brake hoods. We've moved away from the quill stem. We've got the integrated headset stuff, rim brakes. We've got fatter tyres now. Box section aluminium wheels are now deep section carbon wheels. Disc brakes obviously. The old steel forks that had the bend in them to get you the compliance are now carbon, but all super close in position. And then obviously the gearing, to a normal person who didn't know about this would think, well, it's basically the same thing. The only thing that's really changed is the ratios that we now use. That would have been super tough to get that up a hill. And obviously we've got the drop seat stays on the tarmac. But all in all, I found that quite remarkable that back then we'd pretty much already worked out what a bike should look like. Oh, and of course this is carbon with aero tubing as opposed to round steel tubing. Interestingly, Paris-Roubaix was won in 1964 by Peter Post at 28.042 miles per hour on a bike presumably that looked a lot like the Peugeot. And then in 2022, Dylan van Baarle won Paris-Roubaix on what would have been a Dogma F, not the tarmac, and he did it at 28.454 miles per hour. So that's not a huge difference there, is it? Puts it all into perspective. And on that note, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, if you fancy having a look at my website, it's bikotic.com. Until next time.